Hello there, welcome to the Bash. I am Stephen Bash, doing a solo project today about Fox News. We're going to start things off with Fox and Friends. Gretchen Carlson is one of the godliest, most informative, beautiful women I've ever heard on Fox News. I do believe when she's on the O'Reilly Factor, she lets her hair down a little bit more. And I do believe on the O'Reilly Factor, this woman has a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge about godly things. Let's talk about Steve the douchebag Doocy. Do I need to say any more? There should be one word to describe this guy. Idiot. The Brian dude on the right. A nice guy, but a boring guy. A nice guy, but an aloof guy. A nice guy, but a stiff. I mean, this guy's a stiff. He needs to have a little more personality. The folks that do Fox in Front on the weekends, very nice people. I forgot their names. But very nice, the three. I forgot the one pretty girl that does Fox and Friends on the weekend. Very nice. The two guys that do the show, they're very nice, good personalities. Let's talk about some of the shows on Fox News. Let's talk about the Bill O'Reilly. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching the O'Reilly Factor. Bill O'Reilly, when George Bush was president, the Bill O'Reilly Show, or the O'Reilly Factor as it's called, I used to watch. I used to never miss it. I agreed with Bill O'Reilly probably about 50% of the time when George Bush was still president. And things have drastically changed on Fox News since Barack Obama became president. They fired Alan Colmes before Barack Obama was even in the White House. We're going to talk about the Hannity. Anyway, on Bill O'Reilly, I love when Bill O'Reilly stood up to Neil Cavuto on the oil companies and they debated it back and forth, how Bill O'Reilly stood up for the people. Bill O'Reilly stood up for the folks. And Cavuto defended the oil companies, which are pushing for America to be an oligarchy. I did agree with Bill O'Reilly on a lot of different issues. I don't agree with Bill O'Reilly by having Dick, I've never been right about anything in my life, Morris on the show. I don't agree with Bill O'Reilly by having Dennis, I should have never been on Monday Night Football, Saturday Night Live. Putting Dennis Miller on the O'Reilly Factor is like making Celine Dion the host of the Headbangers Ball. Or having Dennis Miller on Monday Night Football is like Celine Dion singing You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I mean, maybe they're friends and this and that. I mean, what has Dennis Miller really done? Why is Dennis Miller famous? I mean, he was the guy that you always scratched your head and wondered why he was on Saturday Night Live. And as a comedian, he's okay. I'd give him on a 1 to 10, I'd give him a 6, but I can't hit the remote quick enough when he comes on there, just because it's the same old stuff. Bill O'Reilly, I haven't read any of his books. I do like Bill O'Reilly. He comes off like he's street smart, but at the same time, and I would give him credit for sometimes coming off like an old punk, just like when he interviewed Barack Obama. He was sitting on the edge of his chair. He came off like an old punk. I'm not saying that's a bad thing all the time. He's got a lot of spunk. But most of the time I disagree with Bill O'Reilly. He has to take the Rupert Murdoch line. Because of the fact, I'm estimating that Fox News pays him about $1 million a month. I'm not sure, and don't etch that in stone, but if I was to estimate Bill O'Reilly, I'm guessing that he makes between $50 and $60 million a year to do what he does. We'll talk more about Bill O'Reilly. And I did lose a lot of respect for Bill O'Reilly when he did that Bold and Fresh tour with Glenn Beck. Bill O'Reilly, you know off camera, thinks Glenn Beck is a political warlock, but will never admit it on camera. And we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the Sean, I wish Alan Colmes was still on show. The Sean Hannity show. Sean Hannity, AKA Slanthead, a fanatical Republican. My question is where is Alan Colmes? I used to never miss the Alan Colmes, with Alan Colmes and Sean Hannity. The Hannity and Colmes show, I never missed it. I loved it. And they lost me, and they lost a lot of people that never vote Republican. Keep in mind, there's people out there that don't necessarily call themselves Democrat like myself, but they would never vote Republican. Unless, of course, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, or Dwight D. Eisenhower rose from the grave. But keep in mind, the Republican Party from 1900 to 2011 is not the same Republican Party from 1860 to 1895. And that's a whole other subject. But anyway, Hannity is what he is. I personally think that Sean Hannity is a chicken hawk. He's a prissy little schoolgirl that probably tattled on his friends growing up. This guy's a multimillionaire. I don't know how much Fox News pays him, but it's a whole lot of money. And his show is not even interesting. Even his Great American Panel in the end, usually if there's a Democrat on there, it's like Doug Schultz, that weakling blue dog. You know, he sounds just like a Republican. I mean, they usually have weak people. They have that hot blonde girl. I think she teaches at a university. It starts with an O, I forget. I should have had some of my facts straight. But anyway, most of the people on the Great American Panel are it's very strong Republican. And then they'll have Don Imus. Is it just me? Does Don Imus look like a reanimated corpse? And I'm not saying that to belittle the guy. He just looks like he's an extra from Dawn of the Dead. Don Imus. You know, he just looks like he's reanimated to talk about. Anyway, let's talk about Gretchen Van Hannity, which used to be called the Greta Van Susteren Show. But now it's called the Greta Van Hannity Show. I will say this. Greta Van Susteren did a brilliant job where she followed and covered and did in-depth journalistic reporting on the Natalie Holloway tragedy. It was wonderful. But basically, I still feel with Greta Van Susteren that she reminds me of 11th or a 12th grader in high school trying to pass her mass media test. She's dry most of the time. She doesn't have enough personality. She doesn't have enough opinion. And maybe that's good in a way, I don't know. But her show is boring, and now her show is just a continuation of Sean Hannity, just in a different style. That's all I really have to say. Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee reminds you, claims to be a neo-evangelical. He reminds you of your real friendly uncle or grandfather that shows up at the ice cream social at church. Real sweet kind of guy, but don't be deceived by that. This guy is a ruthless, cutthroat, libertarian Republican that will stop at nothing to pack his wallet and bank account. And when you listen to his commercials against national health insurance, when you listen to his shows, and he does have some great guests on his show. I was very moved when he had Mark Farner on his show, and Mark Farner, who was in Grand Funk Railroad, one of the greatest American rock bands in the history of rock music in the United States of America. It really moved me when Mark Farner shared a story that his son was in a bad accident. I forget exactly, motorcycle, truck, I'm not sure, but he did break his neck. I guess he's a paraplegic or quadriplegic, I'm not sure, and did not have insurance. He's getting donations, and people are making offerings to him through his church and different groups, and that's wonderful. But the thing when Huckabee said, well, too bad you didn't have health insurance, to Mark Farner. If America wants to become everything that it always wanted to be, we need to have a one-payer system, national health insurance, Medicare for all, anything that how you want to call it, that America needs to take care of its sick. If we could spend billions of dollars on B-2 bombers and billions of dollars on Abrams tanks they're called, we could spend billions of dollars on weapons of death and destruction. And if we could do this, then we have to take care of our citizens. Or we're no better than the Soviet Union was back in the 80s, when the Soviet Union was in an arms race with the Reagan administration, where both countries were making their economies go broke by spending billions of dollars on weapons that they were never going to use on one another. And America has to bring home its 500,000 troops that we have distributed through the world. And America has to raise its taxes on millionaires and billionaires. It's that simple. Anyway, those are the few things I wanted to say about Fox News. I will say what I think about MSNBC. I love Rachel Maddow. I believe Rachel Maddow is one of the most in-depth journalist reporters I've ever heard in my life. The articulation of her, the way she enunciates her words, I love it. Here's my imitation of Rachel Maddow. Which, by the way, I'm never going to agree with Rachel Maddow on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I'm never going to agree with Rachel Maddow on abortion. But I do agree with her on everything else. And she's brilliant. She's one of the best journalists I've ever heard in my life. The Republicans will be Republicans. Republicans will be Republicans. John Boehner is not doing such a good job. And he is a Republican. And Republicans will be doing Republicans. Are they Republicans? Republicans. I'm just joking around, Rachel. I love you. I never miss your show. Ed Schultz rocks. I am a true Ed head. But I don't agree with Ed on the gay issue, and I don't agree with Ed on abortion. But I do agree with them on everything else. I love MSNBC. Lawrence O'Donnell needs to smile more. He's a little bit too pissed off. I love Chris Matthews in Hardball. Chris Matthews is what Chris Matthews is. I agree with Chris Matthews probably about 80% of the time. I think Chris Matthews makes Ronald Reagan into more than he really is. I can statistically prove that Ronald Reagan was probably the 7th or the 9th worst president we ever had in the history of the United States. And that's a whole other story and a whole other show, and we'll talk about it. Anyway, those are the few things that I wanted to share. And as always, I wanted to make it clear. Stephen Bash, here on The Bash, I am a Bible-believing Christian. I believe that Jesus Christ is God. I believe the Bible is the infallible Word of God. Unfortunately, in this country, the Democrats, which actually have more godly social justice to people from the Bible, don't really want to claim that they're Christian. And then the Republican right, or the religious right, which I don't believe is Christian, claim that they are Christian, but even though their political philosophies are actually anti-Bible. And I've always tried to remind people this. And there's my clock in the background. Big Ben! Hey kids, look, there's Big Ben. I wanted to remind people this when they vote in the upcoming elections. Don't let your politics dictate your Christianity. Let your Christianity dictate your politics. And many on the right want to come to Jesus at the altar of mammon, mammon being money. Or they want to come to mammon at the altar of Jesus. Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon, mammon being money. You'll either love one and run from the other, or you'll cling to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and you cannot serve mammon. But I do believe that the Democratic Party's principles and what the Democratic Party stands for more lines up more correctly with the Word of God than the Republicans. And the Republicans somehow get the Christian right or the religious right. Because most Christians out there are ignorant. They're ignorant when it comes to politics. And let me tell most Christians, if you're voting just on abortion or on gay rights, then go vote Republican. But you're cutting your throat on everything else. That's all I can say. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I don't have enough time to talk about Glenn Beck by himself, but I will say this. Glenn Beck is a combination of the robber baron Gilded Age gospel at the turn of the century, mixed in with Jefferson Davis philosophy from the Civil War, John Birch Society, little McCarthyism, and libertarian fanatical republicanism, and you have Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck, in my opinion, is a political warlock. And I will warn my viewers, anytime Glenn Beck talks, please go study it out for yourself. I have many friends that not just listen to Glenn Beck, are followers of Glenn Beck. But the only way that you can prove Glenn Beck wrong is with the Word of God. And we'll talk about Glenn Beck and the political heresies that this guy preaches, let alone the biblical heresies that this guy preaches and talks about on another show. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Bash.